Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for our webinar, Bringing littleBits to Your School or District. My name is Christine Leonard. I'm the Senior Marketing Manager for Education here at littleBits, and I will also be your moderator today. I'm so happy that you took time out of your busy schedules to join us today. And for those of you who will be watching later on demand, thank you for taking the time as well. Before we get started, there are always some housekeeping issues to attend to. And first of all, I seem to have caught the office cold, so please forgive any raspiness of voice. I have a glass of water here. Everything should be fine and dandy, but just wanted to let you all know. In terms of housekeeping, if you are having any audio issues or video issues, post those in the questions. We will try and troubleshoot that for you. And always you can refresh, start over. That seems to be step number one, and that usually takes care of a lot of the bugs. We are recording, and if you miss something or have to jump off or you're getting started late, you won't miss anything. We will be sending that around within one business day. So keep an eye out on your email tomorrow for the recording of today's webinar. If you have questions, there should be a questions tab of your GoToWebinar panel. Get them in. We've got some really great experts here with us today. They are fantastic. We want to get to as many questions as possible, so we'll be leaving 10 to 15 minutes at the end of today. These are the experts, guys, so if you have some good questions, get them in. We will be answering them. We do have one poll today in the poll section. If you have ever used littleBits before, feel free to answer that, and hopefully we can tailor some of the content into based on how many people have experience or not. So with that, I would love to introduce our presenters today. We have first up Sergio Anaya. Sergio started out as a social studies teacher and then moved on to incorporating STEAM learning concepts across multiple disciplines as a curriculum supervisor at Colonial School District. And he just started a new job as the Director of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation at Delaware County Intermediate Unit. So welcome, Sergio. We're really glad to have you here with us today. And then we have Paul Zimmerman. He offers a different angle to training. Technology permeates every facet of life, and while the technical aspect is important to practice and understand, the human behind the technology is just as important. As a technology innovator in Blaine County School District, his focus is finding practical uses for innovative ideas in the classroom. Understanding the teacher's perspective should always be the first step to innovation. And my name again is Christine Leonard. I'm the Senior Education Manager here at littleBits. And when I'm not doing this sort of thing, I'm helping my nieces and nephews with their own inventions. So with that, I am going to pass the baton to Sergio. He's going to get us started. Oh, and there is one major thing that I forgot. We are going to be giving away some code kits at the end of today's presentation, so stay with us all the way to the end. 2 lucky winners are going to win a code kit each, so that's it, the reward for sticking it out all the way to the end. So with that, I am now going to pass it over to Sergio. Sergio, it is all you.
Thank you very much, Christine. Hello, everybody. My name is Sergio Anaya. I am the current Director of Teaching, Learning, and Innovation with Delaware County Intermediate Unit. And I'm going to talk about how we've incorporated innovation and seeds of innovation into our K-12 curriculum at Colonial School District in Montgomery County. At Colonial, and mine, I apologize for that. At Colonial, we have begun our STEAM vision with establishing that we believe STEAM is a culture. We don't see it as an activity. We don't see it as a specific curriculum. We don't see it as a class. We see it as a set of learnings and ideas that all kids need to be engaged in so that they can attack real-world problems. And when we get to the littleBits component, the littleBits as a tool help our students really take their ideas and solve those real-world problems that we give our kids throughout the various curriculum activities and units that we have put into our curriculum. About 5 years ago, we started off with our computer labs, and our computer labs were your traditional model with desktop computers. Kids would come in and it would really be just drill and kill and a lot of remediation. No real innovation, no real creativity. And so we started to unassemble that, and we built smaller computer labs that really focused on mobile technologies and really placing kids in that seat of creativity. We took the maker movement ideas, we embedded them into the curriculum, and what we ended up creating was a curriculum focused around coding and programming, creativity and design, robotics, and making sure that we were making interdisciplinary connections across the curriculum. Each of these...
Sergio, hi. I'm going to interrupt you for a second. It seems like there is a big black box on your presentation. I wonder if you could refresh your screen, and that might make that go away. There we go.
Okay. It was the go-to meeting piece. Sorry.
Oh, got it.
All right.
Thank you.
So when we created this curriculum, we really wanted to focus on what were the core learnings we wanted our kids to know and to be able to do, and what we believed the skill sets that they would need to be successful as they graduated school and went into post-secondary and into the workforce. We focused on coding and programming because we believe that, number one, computer science is really a civil right and really is something that all kids will need to know in order for them to be successful. Creativity and design, because this is where the kids can really apply a lot of their knowledge and to show us what they can create when we give them those real world problems, relevant issues to solve. And then robotics, because this is another venue where the students can apply the coding and the creativity. And why did we go with littleBits? We wanted to make sure that our kids had a number of tools at their disposal as they move through our curriculum. And what we found with littleBits was kind of that central linchpin, that key component that really worked with a number of other tools. Works with Scratch for coding, worked with the Makey-Makeys, worked with a number of other resources that we were already using, and it provided us a real strong foundation to start to build a curriculum, specifically in creativity and design, focused on inventions and inventing. So at the elementary level, we had a number of different tools that our kids have access to. As they move through the middle school, those tools start to increase in their complexity, but all through the end, you see there that littleBits is still one of the main resources and tools that we use, even as we move to the high school. When I personally knew that littleBits were going to be that key component for us is when I visited Drexel's game design program, and I was watching graduate students working with littleBits and designing their own. So I knew that we had that very that tool that we could really start at the elementary level and then continue to build off of it and build off the complexity as our kids moved through our scope and sequence. And then at the middle school, what littleBits has allowed us to do is really start to develop a game design academy that goes through our 7th and 8th grade and then goes into our high school and really prepares our students to engage in those various learnings. And at the elementary level, I spoke again earlier that the B-Bots, the Ozobots, Dot and Dash, Sphero, and Lego, we have a very strong K-12 robotics curriculum, and this is another area where we can integrate littleBits into a number of these different curriculum units. So what I'm going to focus on today is how, through our creativity and design unit, littleBits was kind of the go-to tool that really allowed our students to engage in the engineering design process. Our creativity and design unit starts in kindergarten, where students are introduced to simple circuits. As they move into 1st grade, they're introduced to 3D modeling via the Morphe app, and then they know how to create 3D printers, and then they use their circuit, the skills and the concepts they learn from circuitry to develop various circuits using conductive paint, batteries, cell batteries, and LED lights. And then as they move into second grade, they are utilizing the makey, and then by third grade, they're engaged in littleBits and really designing activities. So in third grade, we have what we call our engineering design journal. And we first introduce our students to the various pieces of littleBits, and we take them through that process. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit behind my own presentation, or getting ahead of my own presentation. So in littleBits in third grade, we start off by taking the task cards and the challenge cards that littleBits provides and introducing our students to each of the components. Within each of these components, the kids learn what the outputs do, what the inputs do, and what the various other resources that littleBits, the power modules, and what they can do. We then ask them to use their creativity and design journal to identify how they use the littleBits. And really, this is our way of assessing our students' learning at hitting our learning tasks. Sorry. We also go through an activity that littleBits provides where we have our students make real-world connections. They take the buzzers, they take the buttons, they take the fans and the small motors, and they go home, and this is their homework, to go find resources and tools and gadgets at home that have the same basic function as our littleBits. And so they start to identify a number of various resources that these components actually mimic in real life. In the end of the unit, we have our students complete a performance task. This is the assessment for our unit, where we have the kids create, the performance task is scaffolded, so there are a number of levels that a student can engage, and they range from everything from a very simple performance task to a more complex open-ended performance task. The performance task you see here is a group of students were tasked with creating a gadget that would make a piece of playground equipment safer for their peers. The one in the middle is a light and a button that would be placed on a slide that when a student slid down via motion sensor, it would send a green light up to the top, which will allow the next group of students to know that they could climb up the slide and safely slide down. When we talk about transdisciplinary and interdisciplinary, when you have access to this specific slide deck, in our 5th grade social studies unit, after our kids have studied the Constitution, after they have studied civil rights, the students are engaged in an inventors and inventions unit. In this unit, students must create some type of invention that will help one of their fellow classmates engage in some access some part of the school, so if the student has a special need. And in this specific unit, we've had kids create everything from a pulley system that would pull a wheelchair up a ramp, a wireless system that will alert the teacher to a student having an issue, a wireless keyboard that allows a student to type on a computer who has limited mobility, all using the various tools that they have access to within our curriculum, including the littleBits. As we move to our middle school students become a little bit more audacious with their projects, and we did attempt to do the project Keytar. Our students wanted to create a Keytar for a number of students who did not have full range of motion in their fingers and in their limbs, so that they could participate in the school band and a couple of other musical areas. So in conclusion, I would ask you, what would this look like in your school setting, and how could this support your curriculum? And if you need or would like access to our design journal, I could have it provided to Christine so she can shoot it out to all of you participants.
Sergio, thank you very, very much. And we have gotten some questions about people interested in getting access to these slide decks, and so we will be sending them out afterward. And so with that, I'm going to transfer it over to Paul, who is more at the beginning stages of his STEAM and coding and littleBits journey, and we'll take it from here.
Good morning, everyone, or afternoon for depending on where you are. I'm Paul Zimmerman, and I'm a Technology Innovator in the Blaine County School District. And the other part of that is I'm the Google Certified Trainer here. So a lot of the things I focus on, and I'll explain this more with the littleBits, is how we're definitely at the beginning stages of this. And so we had long discussions about things, figuring out different tools. But my focus and my thought process is always centered around the teacher's perspective. I focus the way we deliver training, the way we develop training, the way we approach users with issues they have, and in my innovative stuff, how can I find innovative ideas that supplement, add to, or somehow enhance the learning teachers are already doing without disrupting the normal processes that they have to abide by and things that they have to do. And so that's where the innovative part comes up. And let me hit the down button here. Let's go to the next slide. So for us, the problem was the computer coding in general was kind of all over the place. We're in the district with 8 schools, 5 elementaries, 2 high schools, and a middle school. And mainly the elementaries is where we're starting this whole process, but there wasn't really a cohesive plan to how we can do coding. Like, how can we define what coding in the classroom is, because it's the buzzword and there's the hour of code, and then our students end up only having coding exposure during the hour of code thing, because that's when the teachers quote unquote have to do it anyway. So we thought long and hard. We had a committee that worked on this for a little over a year, and we also needed to ask, how can we integrate it into the classrooms? Just like Sergio said, it had to be interdisciplinary. It didn't need to be a siloed kind of an event. And as a tricky part, what tools or what available options are there to have their coding skills not be screen-based? Because the idea of screen time, because we're a smaller district, comes up often in all the different intimate relationships you have with parents and so forth, that we had to be careful about. Well, we're doing this coding thing, and I know that parents that wouldn't see it like we do would wonder, well, why are we looking at screens more? So these were all things that we had to think about. And for me, my main focus originally was clearly defining coding in the first place. Like, what is coding in the classroom look like, and how can we, in an innovative or interesting way, have it be a set of events that we can kind of progress through. So we used the ISTE standards that were at the core of this whole idea, and that was good because that gave us kind of a framework on where we wanted to work with. And also the curriculum mapping was important because we were able to identify a timeline of progression, which is what curriculum mapping is kind of for anyway, but we were able to, using code.org as kind of the beginning of this, and I'm going to round this out to the whole thought, but during the committee, using code.org on the classroom or on the educator side, they have pre-made curriculums, they have a pre-made roadmap of different things and other tools and resources, which gave us kind of a framework on how to do this. But what we wanted is we wanted to have some non-digital or physical representations of the things that our students were doing here, but we had to start them out with the code.org stuff first. So littleBits was key to this whole idea for us, because with code.org, they have some really great steps you can take and progressions and classroom management. You can watch how the kids are going, but they also have unplugged activities, which I'll get to in a minute. But littleBits gave us the key that we needed to have a physical representation of the digital skills they were learning throughout the year. So they can do coding in code.org or Scratch and practice all these things, but at the end, they would, or before littleBits came along, they would only be able to digitally represent things they were doing digitally anyway. And in the real world, I am digitally going to code something on a computer, and then a physical tractor is going to thus do the coding I gave it. So it was important for us to show them that transition. Also, we're a one-to-one school district, so we have 3,500 Chromebooks, and the littleBits software works really well on a Chromebook, so then we could utilize the equipment we already had, which is nice for us because our students they already knew how to use Chromebooks, So we were able to say, well, you know how to use a Chromebook, there's no learning curve there. Let's use this tool on a device you already know how to do, which is just like the workplace where you have a standard machine. I'm doing a new task, but I'm using this machine to do that task. Also, the interface was really easy for staff and students. So the trainings we had for the staff were actually really smooth. The staff was really receptive. And it turns out that while we were using littleBits, they actually were coding stuff on their own. And that just gets off into a random story. But also the kits that we have, it's nice because we bought enough and we have the class sets so that we can accommodate all the kids in the classroom. Because for me, from an innovative perspective, we're really heavy into virtual reality right now, is it's everybody or it's nobody. We have to make sure that everybody is doing this together, because then you can collaborate and work together and all these various things. And like I said a minute ago, littleBits gave us a chance for students to show off their coding skills in a physical way. So they were able to represent physically what they were doing. Also, I'm gonna say it on the next one. And here, the successes that we had and the things that were great about this, which I don't have it in here, is because of the Blockly style that littleBits is using, the kids that have been doing code.org, so the progression is we start with code.org at the beginning of the year. We go through that and we're doing different activities. But later, when we switch them over and say, hey, we're going to use littleBits now because they've seen it and they know it exists, the idea is we don't have to show them anything new in the coding frame and the format of the coding. Like how to code, you're pretty good at that already. What do you want to do with it? What do you want to make your littleBits do? Because you've been doing this coding for a while. You're doing this all year. You've been practicing. You've been doing all these things. You've been using Blockly anyway. This is a new tool. Yes, it's exciting, but the framework of what you've been doing is exactly the same. So there's no learning curve to go from a screen-based coding, the little guy moving around or using Scratch, into a physical representation with motion sensors, like Sergio was saying. And a lot of ours is really visual. A lot of our students are fiddling with the visual stuff. And it also meant that we had a reward at the end of the year for the students, and littleBits being in the curriculum, because we did the curriculum mapping, it is deliberately slotted into the springtime of every school year. So that way when kids come into this, we're starting them out more and more complex. Every single year we get into Google CS later in the middle school, but we start them at the beginning of the year and they all become proficient throughout the year. And then in the spring, the big ta-da is you've been coding, we're doing a great job, we have completed all of our skills that we needed. Let's do a physical version of this. So then they can work in groups. And our idea is going to be have them going around the schools, and kind of like Sergio was saying, is focus on what are some school applications here. So that way I can be integrated into my community, which is my school. How can I integrate into my community using littleBits? What can I solve, or what can I implement, or what can I add to by, and to me that gets into that whole design thinking process where I have to empathetically listen to the people I'm asking questions to, and then do some prototyping and then test it out. And that whole design thinking methodology becomes relevant because I've taken computer coding skills, done design thinking with those new skills, turned them into a physical product that then is given to a customer. And that whole progression makes a lot of sense, and it's only possible because littleBits, the way that it works and the way you have the Blockly interface, and then you integrate, and then you put it into, I mean, in my office, my daughter she was 9 when she made it. She made a temperature sensor for my office because I was always saying that I never knew the temperature in my office. So I have a littleBits temperature sensor sitting on top of a desk in my office every single day, and it's just plugged in. And she coded that because she listened to what I said, she knew how to use it, and she made it all on her own. I just came home from work one day and she says, Dad, here's this temperature sensor, go plug it in at work. So that means that littleBits is the successful endpoint to this coding idea that we in our district have battled with for years. Is make sure we define it, and then why at the end, what are we doing with it? So my advice to others when I think about this stuff, if you're at the very beginning like we were, is you got to let your staff experiment with littleBits for as long as possible. I mean, it can be an obscenely long time only because, one, you're excited to use it, but also a lot of teachers, this might be their first exposure to coding, or it might be their first time seeing that digital version where they're like, oh, I can do it on the screen, but it turns into a physical something, because then your mindset changes from, oh, I can do this on the screen and it danced, into what can I make something in real life do? I can do anything I want. So that open-mindedness becomes definitely relevant. Also, we encourage with our teachers as a part of the curriculum in the code.org, they have the unplugged activities, which is another non-screen based activity that you can do just like with the littleBits. So we try to have a really healthy mix of non-screen activities. So they're the unpluggedfromcode.org or the littleBits style stuff. So that way we can, it's not just coding and it's not that typical, I'm sitting there typing the whole time. That's true, that is a part of it. But to the parents, they can see that, oh, we did these dances to talk about loops, or we're also doing these ideas of the littleBits at the end, which is fun because then the kids can show the parents, which is awesome, and I say that in here. So having ideas from the staff we mentioned, and the students, the thing that I always tell them is, with the ones that we work with, is be creative. You know, it doesn't have to be so bound and controlled. So think about more open-minded about what can I solve, what can I do, or what is something that you would be proud of to showcase at the end of the year if we have something, you know, a parent-teacher conference or something, and the parents can come in and say, look, team 3 made this thing using computer coding. So then the parents who have no idea about coding can say, wow, my 4th grader was able to code this particular device to do this activity. And whatever the activity is irrelevant. The fact that the parents can see the students are doing this is amazing. And littleBits makes that possible. That gives us a target for the end of the year, is having this littleBits in place in all of our, and we have littleBits classroom kits in every school. And yeah, we're very, very excited to start using it. I might hand it back over to Christine.
Oh, thank you so much. That was really, really cool and really informative, and I really liked the narrative that you laid out for us. So I'm going to dive in here, and we're getting some really great questions coming in. So thank you guys. Keep them coming, and if you're experiencing any technical issues, keep those coming too. We have somebody answering that, and if you're just joining us, this is being recorded. Any problems that you have might connecting, we will be sending this around, and we are going to be offering 2 code kits at the very end to 2 attendees, so stay tuned. So, as mentioned before, my name is Christine Leonard. I am the Senior Manager for Education Marketing here at littleBits. Follow us on Twitter at littleBits. I'm sure that a lot of you are very active on Twitter. I see so many educators activating their personal learning networks on Twitter. We are happy to join the conversation and meet you there where you are and engage in some really interesting discussions. The 2 presenters before me, Paul and Sergio, had some really great insights on what's going on in their district, and they also connected it to larger situations and larger trends, and I'm going to do the same. Talk a little bit about the current situation as we see it. We see that there is high-tech use and low-tech understanding amongst youth, and not just youth, but let's face it, amongst adults as well. I don't need to tell you, your educators, that students have access to a breathtaking amount of tech and hardware between personal devices at school, phones. We have computers in our pockets, but just knowing how to use it doesn't mean that you know how it works. And here at littleBits, we don't think that's acceptable. We don't think that's a good idea. We don't think it's good for society to take all this tech that we use for granted. We think it's important for all of us to understand how the hardware that we interact with actually works. And that's connected to the second point, that STEM and coding and hardware has a high barrier to entry. There are experts out there who are in a corner and they tell us how we can and cannot interact with our world. We don't think that's acceptable. We think that everybody should be able to interact with hardware, use it, understand how it works. That they don't have to just be the consumers of tech. They can actually be creators with it. We think that's really, really important, so that we have to lower the barrier of entry so that people can become those creators with technology. Girls, students of color, and low-income students have persistent achievement gaps in STEM, and I'm going to add, by extension, coding and computer science. Again, something that's just not acceptable. We really have to engage with this problem head on, and I'm going to talk a little bit about a study that I saw from NPR, where they talk about girls are increasing their engagement in fields like law and medicine, but not necessarily in coding and computer science. And we have to understand why that is. Why aren't more girls accessing and engaging with some of the amazing tools and ideas out there. We, as educators, have to confront that reality head on. And the fourth point on the current situation is that jobs of tomorrow are going to require creativity and innovation. As much as they will also require coding, as much as they are also going to require hard, quote-unquote, hard skills, they are going to require creativity and innovation first. We don't know what the careers of tomorrow are going to be, so we've got to really equip our students with the tools to adapt, the tools to create, the tools to innovate. That's what the jobs of tomorrow are going to look like. Building on that last point, according to Common Sense Media, kids spend 97% of their time consuming content and only 3% of their time being creative. That's just staggering to me, and I hope it's staggering to you as well. We are enabling people to be okay, I'm hearing a question or some comments that some of the slides are not matching what I'm saying. Hopefully they've gotten a chance to catch up to where I am right now. And if there are any issues, please keep them coming in. We really want to make sure that this is a good technical experience as well as a good content experience for all of you. But as I was saying, that only 3% of students, the kids, spend their time being creative. We want to create a generation of creators, not just consumers. We don't want to only have them consuming content all the time. Let's see, let me try this again. Make sure that everybody can see the slide that I'm on. I want to make sure everybody can see that. So I'm going to move on with the second sort of staggering statistic for me is that 65% of today's students will have careers that don't exist yet. As I was saying before, the skills that are, we can't train today's students to be coders per se, because we don't know that that is the career of the future. What we can train them or give them are the skills and the things that will let them adapt and really seize the careers of the future. And just to personify some of these points, I'm going to talk about some of the movers and shakers of today. One example, we all know his name, Elon Musk. He is the founder of SpaceX, Tesla, and PayPal. He studied physics, economics, and material science, which makes sense. I mean, that's sort of a nice straight line there. However, one thing you may not know is that he taught himself programming at the age of 10 to create his own video games. And the reason why we bring this up is that he didn't set out necessarily to be the founder of companies that we know and use today. He taught himself a skill to accomplish something that he wanted right in that moment. He wanted to create a video game, so he taught himself the tool and the skill that he would need to do that. And we really think that's an example of somebody pursuing something that their own inquiry, their own learning, something that's relevant to them. Jeff Bezos, founder of Amazon, studied electrical engineering and computer science. You may not know, however, that once he rigged an electrical alarm to keep his younger siblings out of his room. And what I like about this example here is that the electrical alarm that he rigged was to solve a problem that he had. And I think a lot of us can identify with not wanting siblings or other people in our stuff. He had a problem, he created the solution for it, and he solved his problem and developed skills along the way that would allow him eventually to apply them in later in life. So I'm hearing that we're still having some slide issues, so I'm going to get out of present mode and hopefully that you can follow along. My assistant here, is that working? Can you see my screen? Great. Okay. So sorry about the technical difficulties, everybody. We'll be sending the slide deck around. We want to make sure that everybody enjoys this, so apologies for the tech problems, but the show must go on. And the third and final example I'm going to give is about Sheryl Sandberg. She is the COO of Facebook and founder of Lean In. She studied management and economics, but what you may not know is that she conducted research in India on leprosy, AIDS, and blindness. And the thing that we like about this particular example is that she got to where she is through the humanities, through studying empathy, through experiencing some on-the-ground topics. And I know for a fact that she actually applies that in her day-to-day experiences at Facebook. But the larger point that we don't know what careers of tomorrow are going to be. And here are examples of three movers and shakers who created skills for themselves without knowing that they were going to end up where they ended up. And I think that's kind of what we would wish for our students. So with that said, the 21st century is going to present new problems that require new skills and demand new careers. So where do you start? I know that Paul and Sergio gave you some examples about where they started, and I will in some ways echo what they said. So number one is build a culture, right? You really have to have the culture to help foster those new skills, and that will allow people to solve those new problems and hopefully launch those new careers, the careers that we don't even know what they're going to be. So administrators, there's a typo, faculty, students, and the larger community all contribute to the culture of innovation. And I know that Sergio and Paul talked at length about this. Number two, you bring in tools that have a low floor and a high ceiling. And this is where littleBits can help. This is something that we take very, very, very seriously. So our mission here at littleBits is to empower everyone to create inventions, large and small, with our platform of easy-to-use electronic building blocks. So we have a library of over 70 of these bits, electronic building blocks. They all fit together with magnets, and it makes it very, very easy to create circuits in seconds and invent in seconds. So how it works, littleBits is a system, and with any system, just as in coding or any other programming, systems have rules. One of the main rules is that the bits are color-coded, and each color means something. Blue equals power. So with electronics, you always need a power source. In this case, it would hook up to a battery or the wall, an outlet. And the green bits are the ones that do something. They are the outputs. They light up, they buzz, they move, they count, they make noise. Kids like the ones that make noise, by the way. And I think Sergio will confirm that for me later on. For the English teachers out there, I like to think of the green bits as the verb bits, the action bits. They do something. The pink bits are the ones that change how the green bits behave. So the bit that I have here is an example of a slide dimmer. So think of the slide dimmer for your lights at home. You can slide it up to make the lights brighter. You can slide it down to make them dimmer. The orange bits add some wire logic and complexity to the circuit. So it can be as simple as, in this case, a branch, all the way up to introducing coding platforms and connecting to the Internet of Things. This combined, the littleBits combined with other materials even, you have limitless possibilities for invention. Here we have students who have created a bubble robot. They are using our fan bit, and they are increasing the size of their bubbles, and I think we can tell from their faces that they're having a pretty good time doing it. We also like to say that littleBits plays nicely with others, that we're not a platform that exists in isolation. And I think you can see from Sergio's experience in particular is that we want to play nicely with other tools, that we want other tools to work with us, and we don't want you to just take out the littleBits, put them away, take out your Legos, put them away, take out your Mickeys, put them away, and never shall the tools interact. We don't believe that. We think it's an invention platform, and any tool that you can use for inventing is something that you can use littleBits for. And this is true of cardboard, by the way. If you don't have any funds and you want to start a makerspace, cardboard is a great way to get started. So, and just recently, we are now integrating with Google's Blockly with our new code kit, which I'll get to in a little bit more detail later. So going back to my original point about low floors and high ceilings, this is actually a concept from Mitch Resnick at MIT's Media Lab, and also building on some of the work of Seymour Papert, for those of you who are familiar with him. The idea of a low floor means that it is easy to get started. It's the barrier to entry is low, and remember what I talked about earlier, that having a low barrier to entry is really important. So because the barrier is low, it means that you can get started inventing and creating right away. You don't need any experience. You don't need anything else besides 2 bits to snap together. But then as your creative and technical confidence grows, the ceiling, you're not going to hit the ceiling right away. As your confidence grows, you're going to be able to do more and more complicated things. So you start off with something basic like a light or a sound, and you can move all the way up to programming, logic, coding, and even developing your own hardware. But the companion idea to this, which is also a Mitch Resnick, Seymour Papert concept, is the idea of wide walls, that it works across curriculum, that it's not sort of this is our engineering class and we only do engineering and it's very dry and staid. We follow the textbook. No, we really believe that it needs to work across curriculum. And when I talk about STEAM and STEM and all of that, I don't think of them as subjects that you just kind of lump together in a fancy, easy to say acronym. We really think of it as a mindset, that you use the skills from the arts and humanities and design to help solve problems in science and engineering and other tech. It really is a mindset. And to quote one of our favorite educators, Lisa Wong, STEAM is not about putting paint on science projects. It's really about mixing left brain and right brain together to come up with amazing solutions to the problems that you have out there. And, Sergio mentioned a couple of examples, especially in humanities, where and social studies, where the students were creating inventions to help solve a social problem after studying maybe the Americans with Disabilities Act. And all of our kits now that are education focused sort of think about this scaffold. Remember when I talked about building creative and technical confidence? That's baked into the education experiences with littleBits kits, where you start off, you're learning about the bits, and then we have lessons for you, and this is what I call the learn to invent phase. You're learning how to invent. And then you start doing challenges, open-ended challenges. Paul and Sarah, you mentioned some of these. And then at the upper end of the scale here, you are doing your own independent learning. You are inventing to learn. You're putting out your own problems and figuring out how to solve them yourself. So this is the path that that students follow. And it's not that different from the path that educators follow. So they start off learning about bits, they learn how to run lessons, they build their own lessons, and then hopefully they are mentoring other teachers and other educators down the line. So I mentioned kind of the experience that's baked into each of the education kits. I do want to talk about the kits specifically, and as well as some of the newer stuff that has just come out. The STEAM student set came out last year, and it comes with 8 invention challenges, 19 bits, and detailed instructions. It comes with an invention guide that is for students, as well as a robust teacher's guide with lessons and alignments to next generation science standards and Common Core standards, as well as classroom management tips and tricks. For those of you that do have to check the standards box, we realized that and baked it into the experience. The kits can support up to 3 students at a time, and the curriculum is aligned for grades 3 to 8. I know that we had some questions earlier about high school. We do find that it can level up, and we can talk a bit more about that in the Q&A section. They're also available in custom class packs for larger groups, and each one is about $300, so we do have an education discount. I'm going to spend a little bit more time talking about the new littleBits code kit that just came out this year, and this is where Paul is using a lot in his program for coding. The idea is it combines block programming with hands-on inventions. It comes with 10 lessons. They align to next generation science standards and over 100 activities. It really is building in real life and coding on the screen. So it is the coding idea and hands-on that really gets kids really engaged. The kit can support up to 3 students, grades 3 and up, and again is available in custom class packs for larger groups. The code kit, the tagline is build games, learn to code, and that's really what it is. You are building something in real life, you're coding it on your computer, and at the end you have fun games that you have built yourself. And games are fun. Games are engaging. It's not just chocolate-covered broccoli. It's not a game to get kids to learn a coding skill. It's game-based learning actively baked into the concept of the kit. And games are also inherently collaborative, and they are something that kids want to do. So each game and an activity and invention that comes in a kit has a coding principle around it. And what we find happens is the kids invent it, they build it. Great, I've built my my tug of war. That's fantastic. But you know what? You know what's missing from this tug of war is sound effects. How can I do sound effects? So they have to learn about the foundational coding principle, such as loops, that is going to allow them to do what they want to do with the game, with the invention. And then they have to test it out. They have to try it with other kids, with their peers. Did it work the way they wanted it to? Didn't? Well, let's try it again. Let's iterate on that. So this whole experience is baked into the kit. And that is also explained to the teacher so that they can, if they're not familiar with coding, can learn alongside, or if they are, really take it to the next level. And I think you'll remember earlier on, I heavily emphasized the importance of collaboration and creativity. And we're seeing this with educators who are using the code kit in littleBits, and not just littleBits, any sort of these tools that that feed into that culture, right? The culture comes first, and then the tools come second. You don't start with the tools, but this culture of collaboration and creativity is just helped along with a tool like the code kit from littleBits. And this is important too, that just because something is fun doesn't mean that it has to be easy. It doesn't mean that there aren't challenges involved with it. Here's an example of a teacher who was helping a student debug her code kit guitar, and that debugging process and figuring out what went wrong or how do you change is important. And so it can be fun, but it's not necessarily always easy. And this just warms the cockles of my heart when I read things like this. The kids told me they would rather miss recess to work on the code kit. And I think that should be true for any tool that you bring in that's tied to the culture that you establish, that kids are excited about their learning and that they really want to take it to the next level, and that it becomes theirs. And that brings me to my final point about, where do you start? And what's important is allowing students to make the learning theirs is really, really, really important. And I'm going to wrap up with one of my favorite quotes, and this quote really drove the concept behind the code kit. Every maker of video games knows something that the makers of curriculum don't seem to understand. You'll never see a video game being advertised as being easy. Kids do not like school will tell you it's not because it's too hard, it's because it's boring. And that kind of goes into this relevance, right? It doesn't, just because something is hard doesn't mean that kids can't do it and can't enjoy it and can't push through it. That's what we want to teach. What it can't be is boring. And that's where the culture is important. And then bringing in tools like littleBits can help with that process. And I'll, this helps to illustrate the relevance thing. Telling somebody that learn this because it's useful for your future is going to give you sort of the droopy, sleepy eyes or the glazed eyes look. That doesn't necessarily mean something to a student in the now who wants to solve a problem now. But if you tell them this tool or this concept will help you invent that game, will help you reach your goal, will help you create something that you want to do right now, it's a very different experience. And that leads to something like, that leads to joy. And joy doesn't mean easy. Joy doesn't mean that it's not difficult or that you didn't have to work hard. In fact, joy often is a result of the hard work. It's the result of the engagement. It's a result of pushing through. And I think as educators here at littleBits, that's what we strive for. Joy is the end goal, as well as the learning objectives. So we are just about 10 minutes toward the hour. So instead of showing more examples of joy, which I think you probably get the idea, I'm going to open it up now for questions and get some of those questions in, because even if we don't answer them today, at this point, I will be responding to them after this is over. So we had lots of questions come in while Sergio and Paul were speaking. And I think the first one that we kind of have to get out of the way at the get-go has to do with funding. And how do you fund programs like littleBits or any other tool that is going to help you solve your problems? So Sergio, maybe you can start, because you've been working with littleBits for a little while. Can you talk about some of the funding options for people out there?
Sure. As my role at Colonial as the curriculum supervisor of social studies, tech ed, world language, a number of other areas, basically I stopped buying textbooks. I reallocated my funds towards innovative practices and innovative resources that we knew would have a quick and larger impact on our kids and how they were working at. Not only that, we sought grant funding and also funding from foundations. We had our Colonial Foundation for Education, which is our local foundation organization, has provided close to $50,000 to $60,000 for our K-6 innovation labs, where we're building maker spaces in each of our libraries. And so as a school district, because we do know funding is tight, we really had to go outside the box and start to actually seek other funding resources to do this innovative work. And the good thing about where we are today, there are a lot of organizations that want to fund our work and want to fund your ideas and your initiatives in your school districts.
Thank you. Paul, how about you? So actually, I'll tie into what Sergio said is as the second part. The first part is for us, because we are at the very beginning stages of this. What we did is we partnered up with the curriculum department, and we gave a presentation to the school board and the public to see if the school board would be willing to vote for funding this project from their kind of position, I guess I should say. And so we had to explain it kind of like Sergio was saying. We had to explain that this would have more of an impact, that this innovative idea would make a difference, and our long-term plan using the curriculum mapping to explain that this is an end game, as a there's a whole bunch of pieces to this, but littleBits is a part of this. So that was definitely, we went to the school board for it. But I will say that what Sergio was saying was that now other places want to fund what we're doing and they want to be involved. Since the school board said yes, now we don't have to ask them ever again, because we have other entities and other organizations that are seeing what we're doing, and it's really, really exciting because we made an investment up front to get it started. But once it got started, and we've been very public with it, and we're all very excited that now outside places are now looking at us saying that's the right way to do it.
It's really encouraging to hear from both of you that outside organizations are putting some skin in the game and helping you be successful with some of these initiatives. It's really, really exciting to hear. Some questions came in about how to get teachers excited about this and around professional development. And Paul, maybe since you're at the beginning stages, can you talk a little bit about more specifically about how you are getting teachers onboarded? How are you going to maintain excitement and whatnot throughout the implementation of this? We'd love to hear a little bit more detail.
So what we have is at every school we have an integration technology specialist now, and that's a new position that we're using this school year. And the way that the angle that we're using, and the ITS gals are using a similar model or mindset that I use, which is everything is about the teachers. We have to focus on what they're doing. So for littleBits, for example, or coding in general, what we tend to do is intercept them or inject ourselves, myself or the other ITS ladies, into the planning process to say, oh, during this unit from day 1 to day 38, at day 11 and day 14 and day 18, it makes sense for us to maybe coding can solve this. Maybe we're doing temperature sensors outside. Normally you would, let's say for like third graders, you want to monitor the temperature range change between 2 seasons or something like that. Well, then we can interject ourselves and say, well, actually, we can use littleBits to code a temperature sensor to do this for you. So then the kids are doing coding to then tie it into the application of the curriculum the teacher was already doing. So getting teachers to see that coding isn't a separate event. Coding can be a tool that ties into the learning. So we are very content focused in that the innovative stuff that we come up with should transparently slide into what the teacher's already doing. So the temperature sensor is kind of a good example. Is that's there? Yeah, that.
That's really interesting. Sergio, since you have been using littleBits for several years now with your students at Colonial, do you have any tips about getting teachers on board or other educators?
The fact that littleBits has a low ceiling and a lot of the various tools that are out there for leading innovative practices have that low entry point, that teachers, once they start to engage with them, they realize how easy they are to use. But once we got over that initial investigation, we did have to seek other professional development areas such as littleBits STEAM professional development courses, which all of our teachers must take, which really help them to learn how to use the tool, but also plan and implement and develop various curriculum resources as well. And then we overlay that with computational thinking, professional development from various resources, so that we can tie in what Paul's talking about, the coding and programming, and how it ties uniquely into littleBits. And that really is going to be our next step in moving in that direction as well, where he's already at.
Yeah, I like what you said about sort of the low floor. It's easy to get started, but I like hearing that you have sort of this ongoing professional development requirement. Both of you sort of checking in, because it's not just a one and done type thing. So the corollary to that question is, let's say, I'm sure we have a lot of teachers and librarians on today's call. If you are a teacher or librarian and you want to bring this to your classroom, how do you talk to administrators about getting on board with something like this? Sergio, do you want to kick us off?
The best way is to come up with a plan, get kids involved, and when they walk in the classroom and see the high engagement of the students, and I think Christine, her favorite quote was, the kids would rather not go to recess but still code and work with the littleBits. And I'm going to say the word play with the various tools and resources, is have them just walk in. Once you've developed an activity and the kids are engaged in that activity, have the administrators, have the school board members, have the various stakeholders walk in to see how high that student engagement really is.
Paul, anything to add on that one?
So I agree with Sergio. Doing it and having them see that engagement makes it real. We had a similar experience with our virtual reality stuff that we're doing here. Is that people need to see it to understand. However, with that, since we were starting at basically at nothing, we didn't have anything to show them, to have them walk into. So this comment would be more towards the people that want to start doing this, but they have nothing to start with. Is when we approached our administrators and we started having these conversations, the center and the focus around how we approached it to them was, how is this going to impact the learning long term? Because if you can prove to them that this tool or that tool can impact the learning in a significant way, but can also be sustainable or have some kind of of a result that is repeating, or it will, oh, I can code this now, but later I'll be more skilled in something more complex. I can code something more complex because littleBits lets me think long term, in that it's easy to code little things now, but I can code much more complex things later. That versatility of the tool ties into the idea of impacting the learning long term, because I buy a tool once that has multiple uses at multiple growth stages. So that was our approach, was impact of the learning long term, and we can continue to use it over and over again in all these various permutations based on their skill level.
Well, everybody, we are at the top of the hour, but I have not forgotten. I have promised 2 code kits to 2 lucky winners. So thank you for sticking it out all the way to the very, very end. So if I can get a virtual drum roll, please. The winners today are Patricia Cotter and Richard Wilson. So congrats to our winners. We'll be following up with you afterwards to get you each a code kit. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Thank you to our presenters. A reminder, this has been recorded and we will be sending it around. Thank you for sticking with us through some of the technical difficulties. I'm really glad that you spent your afternoon with us. Have a wonderful day, everybody. Take care.